now we're looking at your tangible asset note. Now at this point, guys, you would have noticed that we've done most of the calculation already. So completing the tangible asset note is all about knowing your format and where to slot in the figures, because the calculations have been already completed. Okay, so we're going to start off first with land and buildings, which is generally the easiest part of the tangible asset note to complete. So we're going to start off with carrying value at the beginning of the year. So if we go back to our info, right, at the beginning of the year, our land and buildings had a cost of 800,000. And remember, the cost and the carrying value is exactly the same. Okay, so I think we need to scroll down. Let's do that. Right, so an amount of 800,000. Okay, remember there's no accumulated depreciation, so my carrying value at the beginning of the year is 800,000. Okay, then how will carrying value change from the beginning of the year? We now look at movement. So remember, you could have an addition. And remember, additions are always recorded at cost. You could have a disposal. And remember, disposals are obviously at carrying value. And for land and buildings, there's no depreciation, but we're just going to fill this in for now. Okay, so depreciation. Right, so let's go back to our information and let's look at our adjustment for land and buildings. Okay, so somewhere in the info, they told us that we bought new property. So let's now read this carefully. Additional property was purchased on credit on the 2nd of Feb 2008 during the financial year, and the amount was 800,000. On this day, additional burglar security bars were installed. The cost was 25,000. Window frames were also repaired on the 28th of Feb for an amount of 2,000. Right, now what this is testing is whether or not you guys can differentiate between what is an asset and what is an expense. So remember, an asset, something that adds value to the business, something that can be used over and over again. So looking at the information given, obviously the 800,000, right, the cost of the new property is an asset, but what has now added on value to the asset? Remember, by installing these security bars to the windows or wherever, that 25,000 is now adding value to the property. So we're going to now include the 25,000. Now, what about the repairs? So the repairs of 2,000 Rand, remember guys, this is clearly maintenance. You are maintaining the property. So maintenance is classified as an expense, not as an asset. Okay, so remember the window frames were there already. You're simply repairing the window frames. So all you're doing is you maintaining the property. So that 2,000 does not go into your tangible asset note. Please remember that, because that 2,000 is an expense and that belongs in the income statement, not in our balance sheet. So the value of our land and buildings, an amount of 825,000. Okay, so let's fill that in. So land and buildings, 825,000 is our addition. So 825,000. Right, there's obviously no disposal, there's never depreciation, so our carrying value at the end of the year, 800,000 plus 825,000, and that should give us 1,625,000. Just want to quickly double check that. Yeah, 1,625,000. Right, so let's now continue with the tangible asset note. So as you can see, I've already filled in. Remember, this is where we stopped before the ad break. So carrying value for land and buildings at the end of the year, 1,625,000. And then the last two lines of your tangible asset note, cost at the end of the year is exactly the same as carrying value at the end of the year for land and buildings. Okay, right, the easy part done and dusted, land and buildings, not difficult. Let's now move on to equipment. So once again, we're going to look at equipment at the beginning of the financial year. And because the information starts with the beginning of the year, we're not working backwards as sometimes you expected to do in such a question. Right, so my equipment at the beginning of the year, 390,000 is the cost, and accumulated depreciation 104,000. So let's take that through to our note. Okay, so let's just fix that. Right, so equipment cost at the beginning of the year, 390,000. And in brackets, guys, please remember the brackets, accumulated depreciation 104,000. So cost minus accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year, the carrying value 390,000. Okay, you can leave out the 3 zeros if you want to, minus 104,000, and at the beginning of the year my carrying value 286,000. Okay, so 3 very easy marks. Guys, please remember cumulated depreciation is a negative asset. It decreases the value of your asset, so it must be in brackets. Please remember that. Right, so as I said earlier on, remember I've done most of the calculations already, so it's simply now slotting in figures. So additions at cost, remember we did buy an additional, or the owner rather, contributed additional equipment, and the cost of the additional equipment that he contributed was an amount of 84,000. So we're simply taking that through. So 84,000 is my addition at cost, an amount of 84,000. Okay, remember we didn't come across any disposal, so obviously disposal is 0. Depreciation, we did write off depreciation and we did the calculations earlier on. So now it becomes easy because our depreciation for equipment, the total depreciation 64,200. So let's take that through, 64,200, and once again it's got to be in brackets. So 64,200 in brackets because the carrying value is going to decrease. Right, carrying value at the end of the year. So please remember guys, you're going to start off with carrying value at the beginning of the year. You will then add additions because obviously your carrying value now increases because you own another asset, and your depreciation is going to decrease your carrying value. Okay, so again, please guys, the calculation is important. So 286,000 plus 84,000 minus 64,200, and at the end of the year, my carrying value is an amount of 305,800. Okay, right, then the last 2 lines, something else where you guys often make a mistake, so pay attention now. Cost at the end of the year. So I'm going to write my calculations above. So remember, I'm going to start off with cost at the beginning of the year plus any additions. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, our equipment had a cost of 390,000. So let's take that through. So 390,000. And to that 390,000, I am now going to add only my additions. So plus 84,000. So the cost of equipment at the end of the year, let's get the calculator out again. Right, so cost at the beginning, 390,000. Okay, one more 0, correct, plus 84,000. And that's giving us an amount of 474,000. So 474,000. Okay, right, then accumulated depreciation at the end of the year. So remember, you're going to start off with accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year for equipment plus this year's depreciation. Okay, so my accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year, 104,000. Okay, so 104,000 plus the current depreciation that I've written off, okay, this amount here, so plus 64,200, and that will give me the total accumulated depreciation written off thus far. So 104,000 plus 64,200, and that's giving us an amount of 168,200. So 168,200. Right, and I can now quickly check if I am correct. So if I take out my calculator one more time, let's just quickly move that. So if I take my cost, 474,000 minus accumulated depreciation, 168,200. At the end of the year, can you guys see your carrying value is exactly the same? So here's my carrying value here at the end of the year. And obviously the carrying value that I'm getting when I'm subtracting these two figures is the same. So that's how I know I did not make an error. Right, we've got 11 more minutes to go. So let's see if we can quickly look at vehicles. So remember, we're doing the same thing. So cost at the beginning of the year. So let's quickly record that. So at the beginning of the year, my vehicles cost is 510,000 and accumulated depreciation 280,000. So let's fill that in. Okay, so cost an amount of 510,000 minus accumulated depreciation 280,000, and once again it's got to be in brackets. So my carrying value at the beginning of the year, obviously I'm subtracting 510,000 minus 280,000, and that gives us an amount of 230,000. So 230,000. Okay. Right, now your movements for the year. So remember, in vehicles, we had an addition, we had a disposal, and we have depreciation. So let's start with our addition first. So the new vehicle that we purchased during the financial year, I think it was 120,000. We need to now record this 120,000 in our tangible asset note. So let's do that as our addition for the year, right? So addition at cost, 120,000. Then your disposal at carrying value. Now remember guys, there was an asset disposal and you have to record this at cost minus accumulated depreciation at the date of sale. So if we go back to the previous calculation right in the beginning where we did asset disposal, and this is why your calculations are so important, there's your carrying value. So our cost 30,000 minus the accumulated depreciation at the date of sale 3,000. So the carrying value, the worth of the asset that I'm getting rid of is 27,000. So as you can see, the calculation is done already. So all we're doing is we're taking through that 27,000. And remember, you're getting rid of the asset. So your carrying value is going to decrease. It must be in brackets. Right, and then finally my depreciation on vehicles. So I think our depreciation was further down. So remember guys, it must be depreciation for the entire year. So in other words, the 1,500 plus the 1,000 plus the 48,000, it's your total depreciation on vehicles, which is 50,500. So let's take that through. 50,500 in our tangible asset note, and again it must be in brackets because remember the vehicle is losing value. So obviously your carrying value will now decrease when you write off more depreciation. Right, so carrying value at the end of the year. So how do I get carrying value at the end of the year? I start off with carrying value at the beginning of the year. My addition is going to increase the carrying value. Disposal, I'm going to subtract because carrying value decreases. And as I said a few seconds ago, depreciation, you're also going to minus. Right, so let's do that on our calculator. I'm just watching the time, but we seem to have enough time to finish this. So 230,000 plus 120,000 minus 27,000 minus 50,500, and that gives us an amount of 272,500. So 272,500. Okay, right, now the last part, guys, this is where I really need you to pay attention, and I think I'm going to change the color of my pen because I want to show you the calculation. So how do I calculate cost at the end of the financial year? So remember, I am still going to start off with cost at the beginning of the year. So you're still going to start off with your cost at the beginning of the year. Right, so our cost at the beginning of the year is 510,000. To this cost, I am still going to add any additions. So what I purchased, so remember what I purchased, 120,000 is going to be added on. Right, now what do I need to subtract? Because there was an asset disposal, I've got to minus the asset disposal cost. Okay, so disposal, and please remember it is the cost that you are subtracting. So if we go back to our asset disposal account, the cost of this vehicle that we purchased was 30,000, and because we're now getting rid of this asset, we now need to minus that 30,000 from our calculation. So minus 30,000. Right, and that gives us a cost at the end of the year. So let's do this calculation together. We're almost done, guys. Right, so 510,000 plus 120,000 minus the 30,000, and cost at the end of the year an amount of 600,000. Okay, so 600,000 is my cost at the end of the year. Right, now how do I calculate accumulated depreciation at the end of the year? So once again, you're going to start off with accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year. So my accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year, hopefully you guys can see this, 280,000. Okay, so we're going to start off with this 280,000. I am then going to add this year's depreciation. So remember, for this financial year, I've written off 50,500, so plus 50,500, and I now need to subtract the amount that I transferred to asset disposal. Okay, so I'm going to say that one more time. I'm going to minus the amount I transferred to asset disposal, the accumulated depreciation. So let's go back. So remember, this was the amount that you transferred, the total accumulated depreciation on disposal, which is 3,000. So we're now going to minus the 3,000, so minus 3,000. Okay, and that gives us accumulated depreciation at the end of the year. Let's clear that. So we're starting with 280,000, okay, plus 50,500, minus 3,000, and that gives us an amount of 327,500. So 327,500, right? And now we can check whether or not we're correct, because remember, when I now subtract, I need to get this amount here. Okay, so let's do that quickly to see whether we're getting that amount. So remember, I start off with 600,000. So 600,000 minus 327,500, and as you can see, we're obviously getting the 272,500. Okay, right, sure. I thought we were not going to have enough time, but that's fantastic because we were able to do the entire tangible asset note, which is brilliant. So remember guys, you could be given a balance sheet at the end of the year, you could be given a year-end adjustment, or you could be given a question telling you complete the tangible asset note. And often, if it's not asked in the financial statement, it could be part of interpretations when you're doing the cash flow statement and ratio analysis. Okay, so please remember that, guys. Right, so down to our last two questions, which is quite straightforward. Calculate the amount for tangible asset carrying value, and in which financial statement will you record this? So obviously they're referring to at the end of the year. Let's just get a different color pen. So we're talking about at year end. So remember, in the balance sheet, that's where you're going to show this amount. In your balance sheet, you're obviously going to show the total of land and buildings, plus the carrying value of equipment, plus the carrying value of your vehicles. Okay, so 1,625,000 plus 305,800 plus the 272,500, and that is where you're going to show. So let's do this quickly. I'm just looking at the clock, guys, but it should be fine. So 1,625,000 plus 305,800 plus 272,500, and in our balance sheet we will show our assets as 2,203,000, and I'm sure there was another 3 there, 300. Okay, so 2,203,300. So this figure will be shown in the balance sheet. Okay, right. Remember, in the balance sheet, obviously under your heading called tangible assets. And remember, this is shown as carrying value. Right, and then finally the last question, calculate total depreciation for the year recorded in the income statement. So remember, in the income statement, your total depreciation is obviously depreciation on equipment plus depreciation on vehicles. So all you're doing is adding up depreciation on equipment, 64,200, plus depreciation on vehicles, 50,500, and that gives us an amount of 114,700. Okay, so 114,700. So this is what you would show as depreciation in the income statement. And remember guys, you don't separate this, but you obviously show it as one amount. You can show the calculations separately, but the answer itself in the income statement as one amount.